This is as Mary was saying in her little introduction, this is the last of this introductory series of 6 sessions here in Ukiah. So that the aim has been to help to let each session stand on its own, as well as to be a sort of progressive collection. And so this evening, the title of the theme of the evening is Hurdles and Pitfalls. So this might sound like all the bad news. All the good stuff has happened already, and this is the addressing the kind of difficulties and nastinesses, the headaches that come with trying to practice meditation. But hopefully, as I talk a little bit to introduce the evening, you'll get a sense for it's actually very, very useful to hear about some of the difficulties and some ways and means that we can use and develop to counteract those. Also, these evenings are for all of you, so if there are things that I say, if I kind of lapse into too much Buddhist jargon and presume the knowledge or understanding of folks is too much, then just do stop me and I'll ask for something to be clarified, because the point is to help make things a bit more understandable, useful, and to be able to take some of these themes of meditation and help our lives to be lived more peacefully, more joyfully, and with greater understanding. So please don't be shy. That it really is for you, so that there's no question that's too stupid or you think is too foolish, or of course everyone else here knows the answer to this. Maybe that's true. But the point is that if you don't understand something or something can be clarified, please just do inquire and bring it up, because I'm more than happy to help try and shed some light on different areas. So the main themes that we've been looking at over the last 5 weeks, 6 weeks, have been establishing the quality of concentration, focus, development of insight and wisdom, and how wisdom relates to compassion and the practices of contemplation and reflection, how these different elements all fit together. So just in these few weeks, this is covering a pretty broad range of essential elements of Buddhist meditation. So this evening the aim is to talk about the kind of difficulties that we encounter with pretty much any of these areas of meditation. It's very non-specific and even crosses religious boundaries. So when you talk about doing meditation or contemplative prayer with Christians and you start talking about these same kind of themes, they all start nodding in agreement to go, yes, it's exactly the same whether you're a Christian or you're a Buddhist. Everyone has trouble with either A, trying to keep the chattering mind from taking over the entire show, or B, falling asleep and missing the whole thing. So whether you're a Christian, Buddhist, Hindu, it doesn't really matter. I remember at an ordination ceremony of a young man in our community, his sister came, and she'd been a nun in a Hindu tradition. They were Slovenian, actually, the family. And she'd been a nun in a Hindu tradition for about 10 years, and she had this very sort of dramatic, bright orange robes and this kind of really spiffy turban. And so everyone was like, wow, she must be this really serious, super-duper yogi. And then halfway through the ceremony, people start noticing her kind of nodding off, thinking, oh, she's just like us, Obviously, Buddhists and Hindus have a great deal in common. Hindu dullness does not vary very much from Buddhist dullness. All paths lead up the same mountain. So anyway, I thought I would talk about some of the sort of standard obstacles hurdles and pitfalls that we encounter in meditation. And these are classically divided up into 5 different qualities. So the first is that of sense desire, kama chanda, it's called. So that is the mind hungering for some pleasure, so that you find yourself, when you're sitting down to meditate, rather than, say, the mind staying on the desired meditation object, then you hear a sound, like you hear a piece of music playing from a building nearby, and the mind gets enraptured by the music. Or maybe there's no music available, so you just conjure some up of your own and start singing songs to yourself. Or maybe you're hungry. Oftentimes on meditation retreats, they have different disciplines around food and meal times, and so there's no supper in the evening. So my own teacher, Ajahn Amaro, would describe how when he was a novice in the monastery in northeast Thailand, he would visualize Chinese noodles. He would hallucinate noodles. He said it would be so strong he could taste them going into his mouth. He could feel them, sliding across his tongue. And or they have these little bananas that are called fragrant bananas, gloe hom, they're called in Thai. And he said he could smell them. Sitting in the meditation hall, his mouth would be just pouring with saliva, and he could smell them, he could taste them, he could feel them on his tongue. Just the kind of hungering of the body for something to eat, and just fantasizing. Wouldn't it be marvelous just to have a fragrant banana? What he wouldn't do for a bowl of Chinese noodles? Yes, fantasizing desperately. So that these kind of this is the obstacle of sense desire, the mind drawn by the appeal of some kind of sound or a smell or a taste or a thought or a passion. Another of the wonderful stories I was just reading the other day was of when before the city of 10,000 Buddhas opened up, they had another monastery back down in the city in the Mission District in an old mattress factory. And one of the monks, he was actually a novice in the early days. He had been in the U.S. Navy, and he was a very kind of big, strapping guy. And they had this rule of strict 1 meal a day rule. And he every so often, as a novice, he could still use money, and so every so often the monastery fare would not really be able to kind of cut it with his desires, and so he'd go down and hit the pie shop. And one day he went out to the pie shop and gorged himself in all these pies, and even after he filled himself full, there was one pie left that he just didn't have room for, no matter how hard he tried. So he stashed the pie in his bag and went back to the monastery, and even though he'd stuffed himself stupid, and he couldn't imagine ever being hungry again, round about 3 or 4 in the afternoon, that little familiar rumbling started happening, and the next thing he knew, he started fantasizing about this pie. And they're very, very strict disciplines, so it was like totally verboten to eat anything in the evening, but all through the evening meditation and the master's Dharma talk, he kept thinking, the pie. I've got a really juicy berry pie in my bag. So this pie was burning a hole in his bag, and finally he, as one does sometimes in these occasions, he thought, well, I don't care what the karmic result of this is, I can't stand it, this is too much trouble, I'm just going to do it. Munch and be damned. So he planned it all out, and after everyone, because they get up at 3 in the morning then, so he waited till everyone had retired, and then went up the fire escape, through the window, up the fire escape, onto the roof of the monastery. And he settles himself down behind the chimney stack, and he gets the pie out of his bag, and just takes one mouthful. This is nirvana. This is absolute total bliss. This is really worth it. And then he hears the sound of feet on the fire escape. He thinks, what? This is 10 o'clock at night. No one comes up on the roof at night time. And so he thought, quick, do something. So he then starts pretending he's doing walking meditation, walking around the top of the building, very diligently and in a very kind of dignified, austere manner, kind of doing. Here am I, the religious devotee, carrying on with my meditation through the small hours of the night. And then, but he can't imagine who it is, and so then over the parapet there appears the master, of course, the abbot of the monastery. Pops over the fire escape, and mimicking the exact same posture, starts doing walking meditation in the opposite direction. So he's walking along with his eyes down on the ground, and then the master walks past him once, twice, in exactly the same posture, diligent, ardent, focused completely on the meditation, and by this time his heart's doing about 200 beats a minute, and pouring sweat, and finally on the third round, as they cross each other, the master stops and looks him in the face and says, "How does it feel?" And gives him a big smile and says, "Eat your pie." And then they both crack up with laughter, and he walks up and leaves him in peace. So there's I could spend all night telling desire stories, but so these are the kind of things that can drag the mind away when we meditate. So the Buddha used a number of analogies to describe these states. So one was, he described the five obstructions to meditation in terms of water. So that, say, sense desire is like when water has got dye in it. It's like the water's been colored, like yellow or green or blue or red or whatever. So that the water of the mind has got an added pigment in it. It's kind of colored. It's changed from its original state. Also, he used an analogy of being in debt. So that when the mind is caught up in a state of sense desire, then it's like being in debt. And then when we free the heart from sense desire, when we say, well, I know that pie is burning a hole in my bag, but I could probably survive the night if I didn't eat it. And actually, I almost certainly will feel a lot happier if I resist this desire, if I let go of this desire rather than pursue it. If I just let that go, will I be incomplete? And so then, that in that moment of letting go, of recognizing that feeling of desire and kind of looking at the painful result of it, or once you've already followed it, seeing the kind of painful the kind of painful or embarrassing result of following it, then we recognize that, and so we break free of that, the kind of the thrall, the pull of that energy. So this is like, the Buddha said, this is like being free of debt. It's like when you've paid off a debt, that sense of a quality of relief. So that's like the heart having let go of that pull towards some sense object, some sense desire. So the next one is negativity or aversion, ill will, where that music is playing in the house next door and it's really irritating, and you wish you would shut up. And then you think of all the things that you're going to do to the neighbors to force them to stop annoying you because you're trying to meditate, and you show all the terrible karma they're creating by interrupting your spiritual life. And so that we create this whole story, this kind of negativity out of this sound. And maybe in one of the earlier sessions I told the story of when Ajahn Amaro was visiting a little monastery in London, and it was a very small place, and probably the same number of people as are here this evening were packed into a space about a fifth or a sixth of the size, a little upstairs room in a house in London. It's really steamy, which is pretty rare for a night in London, even in summer. In England, it's banner headlines if it goes over 80 degrees, so that it was a kind of hot, steamy night in London, and Ajahn Amaro was visiting from Thailand, so everyone was very revved up about, oh, great master visiting from the Far East. And so they'd sit there and everything would get kind of hotter and hotter and hotter, and then they'd open the windows, but there was loud rock music playing in the pub across the way. And so as soon as they open the windows, they'd be so then they cool down a bit, but the music would get loud, would be really loud, and so then people would start muttering and shuffling, and then they close the windows again, and then the room would start heating up. And so Ajahn Chah let them cook like this for about an hour and a half. Just sat there, and everyone's looking at the bell, thinking, "He's got to ring it soon, please." So shuttling between raucous music and getting overheated, and finally, when Ajahn Chah liberated them, rang the bell, the first thing he said was, "You think that the sound is annoying you, but actually it's you that's annoying the sound. The sound is just what it is. It's not there trying to upset you, it's just doing what sound is supposed to do. If there's annoyance, it's only coming from one place, you." So the ease with which the mind moves into ill will, negativity, towards external objects or towards pain in the body, it's so easy to resent that pain in our knee. Any of us who've tried to sit on the floor for more than 10 minutes, half an hour, aches and pains in the body, it seems so reasonable to hate that. If only I didn't have this pain in my knee, I would be happy. If only I could get rid of this obsessive thought, I'd never ask for anything else ever again. If I could just stop thinking this ridiculous thought, if I could stop thinking of that irritating pop song, if I could just get rid of that terrible tune. Oftentimes on retreats we end up here obsessively churning up in the mind songs that we don't even like. There's a famous meditation teacher, American meditation teacher, Joseph Goldstein, would tell the story of how he was on a solitary retreat in a cabin by a stream one time, and he got so obsessed with the way that the stream was playing the Star-Spangled Banner. He actually was reduced to going out and moving the rocks in the stream, so he would stop playing this aggravating tune. So the problem is not the rocks usually. Can be, but usually it's not the rock, it's the mind that's the problem. And so the Buddha described this quality of ill will or negativity. He said this is like water that is boiling. It's like water that's heated and is bubbling. And that also another analogy. See, I've got my script this evening for a change. This is my... because I forget which way around these things go. So the... hatred and aversion is like being in a state of sickness. So that it's like when the body is sick, then we're in a state of... It's like hatred is like being in a state of disease. And when we recognize what we're doing, like, hey, the sound is just a sound. If I put that music on, I enjoy it. When the neighbor puts it on, I call it ruining my meditation. What is this? It's just my mind creating a problem when there isn't one. So, in a similar way, we can recognize that we're creating that, or the tension and fear and aversion towards a pain in our leg, and we say, if we just relax the body, relax the attitude towards it, and realize, if I let go of this and just let the pain be the pain rather than my big problem or incipient trip to the emergency room, if I just leave it alone and relax with it, allow it to be the way it is, then the actual level of pain diminishes rapidly, enormously. So that, when we relax the body around the feeling of pain, it goes from like a level 6 pain to a level 3 or 4. And then we find that when we relax our attitude towards it, and when we were talking about loving kindness practice, we spoke about this a lot, then even though the pain is still there, a sort of level 3 or 4, I'm just kind of making these numbers up. There's no official range of pain degrees. We find that even though it's uncomfortable, it's absolutely not a problem. So this is letting go of aversion. This is like being free from sickness, that feeling of relief. So then the next of the obstructions and hindrances to meditation is known in Buddhist jargon by the wonderful term sloth and torpor. Sloth and torpor, which kind of, when you're in the sort of been hanging around the Buddhist meditation world, it sort of rolls off the tongue like everyone goes around the supermarket talking about sloth and torpor. But it's a wonderful pair of terms, because it's referring to this dull, heavy, not quite asleep, not quite awake states of mind. And so that what often happens when you start to learn to practice meditation, in the beginning the mind is so sort of busy and agitated and bouncing around all over the place, and the body is so sort of tense or uncomfortable that it's impossible to think of it not being a very kind of alert, the mind in a very keen state or very aroused. After a while, you've trained the mind to focus a bit, the body has got used to sitting in a cross-legged posture, and everything sort of calms down somewhat. And this is what, when you notice in a monastery, the really new people, they're always sitting bolt upright like this, very keen and awake, because their minds are thinking 16 things at once, and their bodies are sort of uncomfortable and tense. After someone's been there about 3 or 4 months, 6 months, 8 months, they've got a nice kind of relaxed sway to them, and you realize they're really settling into the life. Not anagarika leaf, of course. But so that this is easy. Once there's the kind of arousing, painful or arousing, stimulating influences sort of abate a little bit, then the mind just goes into this other gear, because we don't really know of anything between full ahead or dead stop. If we're alert, that means we're afraid, we're excited, we're frightened, we're irritated. And if we're peaceful, we're zoned out. We're not feeling anything. We're kind of switched off. But to be alert and peaceful, we don't know that. So this is the great meditator's disease, is sloth and torpor, dullness. In the Pali language, in the Buddhist language, this is called tinamita. Tinamita. So kamachanda is sense desire, vyapada is ill will, tinamita is dullness. So there are many, many little tricks of the trade, so I can demonstrate. So the way that dullness works is like sleep happens in waves. And so the main problem, the reason why dullness is like the great meditator's disease, is because the very means by way you would work with it are not accessible to you because you're fast asleep. So you can't think, oh, what shall I do about this dullness? Because there's not enough sharpness to even think of that most of the time. We're already lost in that heavy state. And also, it can be very peaceful. I remember saying when I was a new novice at the monastery in Thailand, I was saying, my meditation's so much better in the morning. In the evening, it's so much pain in my legs, and I'm being eaten by the mosquitoes, and it's just so uncomfortable. It's just those sittings go for go for on and on and on. It's only an hour, but time goes so slow. In the morning, my meditation's so much better. Just goes by in a flash. And then this other novice said, well, yeah, because you're fast asleep. I said, what? He said, oh, yeah, you're totally out of it. And I said, no, I'm not. What do you mean? But he wasn't fooled at all. He said, no, you're totally, your head's halfway down to the floor. You're only semi-conscious. It's not, you're not sort of in deep samadhi. You're just... So sometimes we can feel like it can be very deceptive. So we can feel like we're wide awake, and we can say, oh yeah, my meditation's really going good here. Yeah, very peaceful, calm. Yeah, everything's really fine. Yeah, I'm dead concentrated. Absolutely no problems with my sitting at all. Wow, I can even feel my third eye starting to open. This strange pressure on my forehead. Yeah. So that strange pressure can be can just be the carpet. So the trick is when you know that you're prone to dullness, your friends have told you, or you've woken up with your nose on the carpet, then the trick is to catch it at the first wave. So this is the main methodology. So one of the things you can do, I'll just use the famous bell striker, to use a matchstick or some little stick between your hands. So if you hold it, this is a bit too heavy for that. So if you hold it between your thumbs like that, if my thumbs are in my lap, right? If you hold a little match or some stick between your thumbs, then as soon as the mind starts to get dull, the fingers start relaxing. So what will happen is that the match or whatever it is you're holding will fall into your hands as soon as the thumbs start to drop. So then that's a cue, like, oh, that's the first wave has arrived. So then, to open the eyes, to kind of straighten the spine, and then what you'll find is that there's another wave comes just past that, and the eyes will start blurring and the body will want to droop. But if you just resist that and just don't go with it, then after maybe one or two other little waves, then it'll pass off and it disappears. And so then it's a very easy way of counteracting that tendency. Also, another thing that you can do is just using your vision, like you open your eyes and then focus on a candle flame or some object in front of you. And as soon as the vision starts to blur or to separate, you know that you're going. And if you realize that you're sleepy and you say, okay, better open my eyes, and then you're not quite sure whether you are really sleepy or not, and you say, okay, I better open my eyes. I better open my eyes. Then you know, yeah, I am sleepy. If the eyes won't open, that's a sure sign. There are also many other little tricks you can do. One of the favorite ones is to take something like a matchbox or a book and put it on your head. It's actually easier if you're shaven-headed. It doesn't really work if you've got a hairdo. It's trickier, but you put something on your head like that, and so that then as soon as you start to nod, off it drops. This is very good if you're sitting with a group of other people, because then you offset your dullness with pride. You see, you don't look bad in front of other people, so then you use your vanity to counteract your dullness. It's called offsetting one problem with another. But that's also a very, very easy way. Just as the body starts to droop, then you notice it. Maybe it looks a little bit strange, but sometimes if you've really developed the bad habit of falling into dullness, then you'll do anything to try and just be able to catch it as it begins. So then dullness is equated with having water that's covered in algae, pondweed. It's kind of scummy water that's all sort of sludgy, impenetrable. That's the sort of like the mind is covered over with this layer of algae. You might be very fond of algae, but it doesn't make the water very clear. You can't, it won't reflect anything. It's a kind of a dull, heavy quality. Or also the Buddha equated this with being in prison, being in a state of prison. And when the mind is free from dullness, when we've broken through that or learned to not let that take root, then this is like being free from prison, or having the water that's free from the pondweed. So then the opposite of dullness, which I kind of referred to a little bit before, is restlessness. And this has the wonderful name in Buddhist language of udacha kukucha. It's like it even feels itchy, sounds itchy. Udacha got the udacha kukuchas. So it means restlessness, agitation, fretting, the fretful, worrying, agitated, restless, fidgeting mind. So this is the opposite of dullness. It's like when you've got too much energy and the whole body is unbalanced. And so the Buddha equated this with water which is being blown by the wind or stirred up and agitated. So then for restlessness, then the main thing to do is to really bring the attention into the body, and then particularly using the kind of body sweeping I've been describing in the sittings to just relax each part of the body. Also using the breath, and particularly the out-breath, the quality of the out-breath to just help let the body, blow off some steam, and to just, lose that sort of stirred up, agitated, turbulent quality. And then the Buddha described this as when one's caught up in slavery, when one's caught up in restlessness, it's like being enslaved. Right? And when we're free from that restlessness, then that's like being freed from a state of slavery and being subject to the demands of another. So this can not just be physical restlessness, but also mental restlessness, that kind of just agitated, busy quality. But in the same way, just continually coming to the breath, calming the body, relaxing the body is a very good way of dealing with restlessness. And I mean, again, like with dullness, there's thousands of cures and ways to work with this. Another method that my own teacher Ajahn Amaro would recommend is just go out and do walking meditation very fast, like just walking as quickly as you can, just kind of pound the path up and down for at least half an hour, 3/4 of an hour, and just basically exhaust yourself. Very simple. Just physically burn off a lot of that energy, and then come back to the sitting, or to just then bring the mind to a more steady focus. And then the last of these hurdles and pitfalls is the quality of doubt, the mind caught in uncertainty. And this is not the uncertainty of the wise reflection on the transitory and unstable nature of all things, but this is, what should I do next? What should I have for supper? Should I move now? Should I not move now? Who am I? What am I? Where am I? Where did I come from? Where am I going? Should I change my career? Should I change my partner? Should I change the wallpaper? Should I dye my hair? Change my glasses? Should I stop asking myself stupid questions? What should I do to get rid of this doubt? Yeah. So that doubt is rather like udacha kukucha. It's called vichikicha. When you got the vichikichas. And this is the mind caught in endless questioning and speculating and indecision. It's a sort of Libran problem. Asking forgiveness for all the Librans here, but I know that there are several Librans who live at the monastery who continually talk about indecision or having. And I remember one time, many years ago, I had no particular interest or knowledge in astrology, but the day it caught my attention was I'd had a weekend party. There was about a couple of dozen people been staying down at the place where I lived in the country in England, the countryside. And there was a car full of my friends going back to London, and another batch of people were staying at the house. And there was this guy standing in the doorway with 1 foot inside the house and 1 foot outside the house. And the people in the car were saying, "Well, are you coming or are you staying?" And he was just like paralyzed in the doorway. And then this other friend of mine said, "Are you a Libran?" He said, "How did you know?" So Librans or not, I'm not going to malign Librans for their indecisive capacities, but that state of mind where we're just caught in a dilemma, where doubt really takes over is in the situation of doubt, when it's a real problem like this. It's like when we try to think our way to the end of a doubt. So doubt is like a courtroom battle, and no matter how much you build up the evidence for one side, the other lawyer will always come up with an argument to counteract it, because that's what the lawyers are paid to do. Right? I mean, there are probably some lawyers in the room. I mean, it's like that's the job, is to come up with a counter-argument. And so even when you get a judgment, and finally, the case is decided, you just go to appeal and you run it all again. And then you take it to a higher court and a higher court and a higher court. So the doubting mind will always be piling up evidence for A against B and B against A. So the fact is, we can't think our way to the end of a doubt. So then how do we deal with doubt? How do we actually get the mind to drop that endless speculating and uncertainty? So that the best way is to step out of the doubt, to actually recognize this is a state of doubt. This is a state of doubt. It's telling me there's something missing. It's telling me that I'm this ambulatory question that's missing its answer. And when I get the answer, I'll be complete. Just like when I get rid of this pain in my knee, I'll be happy. When I get hold of the Chinese noodles, I'll be happy. When I remember the words to that song, I'll be happy. That's its message. It's lie, really. And so then, rather than believing in the story of it, the lie of it, just say, oh, this is a doubt. This is complete in and of itself. It's telling me there's a bit missing, but actually, this is a complete thing. So just to tell our last story, a number of years ago, myself and another monk were the kind of secretaries and sort of Mr. Fix-Its of this large monastery in England called Amaravati, had a resident community of about 50 or 60 people and a lot of stuff happening. And when anything needed to be done or fixed or decided, people would come to the office and they'd come with their particular problem and say, what are we going to do about the roof on the nuns' vihara? What are we going to do about the water tank? What are we going to do about this teaching engagement? What are we going to do about what? And so, over and over again, I would find myself having taken responsibility or having picked up this person's problem, and I would find myself taking care of it. And this other monk, who had an equal set of duties, always managed to avoid it. And I thought, how does he do that? Every time. How come I get landed with all of this stuff? It's kind of our job, but how come it's always landing on my desk and not his? And then I started to notice when someone says, what are we going to do about the felt on this roof? What are we going to do about the water tank? What are we going to do about... And I would say, well, we could do this, or we could do that, or I could call the roofer, and what about such and such? And I would come up with solutions. I would come up with advice. I would come up with say, well, let me find out about it for you. And then I began to notice that when people came in the room, the way he would respond would be to say, good question. What are we going to do about the felts on the roof? What are we going to do about the water tank? Good question. And when I first realized he did this, I thought, you rat. That's evil. How did you figure that one out? And of course, I was most annoyed because he'd been doing this for years and I hadn't noticed, And he wasn't actually being lazy or kind of malicious. It was just, he'd figured out this very skillful response and I just hadn't figured it out. So this is one of the great ways to respond to doubt. When the mind is begging for an answer, what should I do? Is this the time to carry on with meditation on the breath? Should I go and do a body sweeping? Should I drop the breath and go and do insight practice? What should I do? Good question. Or, this is a doubt. Doubts arise and pass away. So any way that we can to sort of get some leverage on it and to step out of the text of the doubt and out of that structure that says, if I just had the answer to this, I would be happy. Any way to step out of that and say, oh, this is a feeling. There's a question here. The universe will not be completed if I get the answer to this question. The universe is complete already. It's just there's a thing that is not known. That's all. So then we're able to shed that kind of tyranny that the doubting mind can bring. And some people have very little problem with this. For some it's a huge deal. But this is the fifth of the five main hurdles and pitfalls. And so the Buddha said doubt is like being in a desert. It's like making a long journey through a desert and getting through doubt, getting to the other side of doubt, dropping a doubt is like getting through a desert safely. Another way of resolving it is a Christian monk who's a friend of ours called Brother David Steindelrast would talk about the three principal vows of Christian monasticism. renunciation, celibacy, and obedience in terms of different conundrums. And his the way he talked about obedience was with the conundrum of when you drop the question, the answer appears. And so obedience is about listening. It comes from the Latin ob audiens, to be completely listening. And so, just as we were talking about compassion last week and this practice of listening, a lot of getting through doubt is really employing that same kind of process, like dropping the question, being able to say, good question, or this is only a question. It's the complete thing in and of itself. It's like dropping the question. Then what you find is that the answer appears. That in a way that you let a bit of space be around the doubt. And then the answer arises from an intuition of your own heart. So that you can't think your way to the end of a doubt. But when we leave it alone, we let some space happen around it, some space be around it, then we, in a way, can tap into our own intuition a lot more easily. So the Buddha said this was like the mind being in a state of doubt is like cloudy water, like muddy water. But not only muddy water, but muddy water in a bowl in a dark cupboard. So that's, he kind of describes as the heaviest one. That kind of burns up most of our energy. So that's the five, kind of a short description of the main 5 sets of problems. So we'll have a little sitting now, and then there'll be time for some questions. So if you want to just stretch your legs for a moment before we have the sitting period, please do so for just for a minute. Debbie, Ajahn Sundara, and Ajahn Chandasiri are all Librans. Pisceans about it's all the double signs, all the Pisceans, Geminis, and Librans. Centering the attention in the body, first of all, just establishing the spine in the center of our attention. Just letting it stretch a little and grow upwards. Helping to lend a quality of alertness, energy. And then around the spine, just let the rest of the body relax and soften. And slowly sweeping the attention through all the different parts of the body, and wherever you find any kind of tightness, tension, the body clenched up in the face, or the shoulders, stomach, the legs, wherever it might be. Just consciously let yourself relax there. So we establish the body in a balance of energy and relaxation. The body both alert, upright, but completely at ease, at rest. And to help sustain our attention in the present moment, just narrowing the field of focus onto the breath. Just this simple gentle pattern of feelings. The body breathing at its own rhythm. Just let this be the very center of our attention. The sounds we hear, the rustling leaves, the cars on the road, my voice, just letting these be around the perimeter, feelings of the body, different thoughts that arise, just let them be at the edges. Let the feeling of the breath just be the very central marker, the heart of our attention. Just taking this simple exercise to be what we aim our attention at for the next few minutes, next little while. Whatever else arises in our mind is important to be figured out, calculated, planned, recollected, fought against, chased after. Whatever of these hindrances, these 5 different obstacles that might arise, just try to work with them in some of the ways I've been describing, whatever it is that manifests. Whether it's agitation, sense desire, irritation, dullness, doubt. As the drift occurs in one of those directions or another, just try to apply the kind of advice that I was giving. Feeling that state of of being in a desert or in debt, imprisoned. And then when free of that particular obstacle, when we've let it go, let it settle, let it fade, just noticing that quality of freedom from disease, out of debt, out of the desert. Just notice how good that feels. We don't have to create particular problems. They'll arise on their own. Just keep the attention as fully as we can with the breath, and just let these minutes of meditation, next 10, 15, 20 minutes, just unfold as they will, working with different obstacles as they arise. And if there's no obstacles, just enjoy the present. Open the heart to the present. If we're irritated by a feeling, counteracting irritation, ill will with loving kindness, open-heartedness, acceptance. It's an interesting sexual fantasy, counteracting that by contemplating the downside of pursuing desire. If you really got what you wanted, if we had to live with that in that state for a year, 10 years, 100 years, how would that be? If we're drifting into dullness, counteract that by straightening the spine, opening the eyes, rousing energy. For experiencing restlessness, following the out-breath really closely, fully to its end, calming the body, letting the body settle fully and completely. If it's doubt, what am I supposed to do? Is this the right thing? What am I doing here? What was I going to do this evening? Stepping out of the doubt. This is a good question. It's working with all these different drifting, these drifts and pulls, these currents, blown by the wind, pulled by the tide, tugged by the current, nudged by the different sea creatures, shoved by the engine. All these different forces pulling and tugging in different directions. That's working, adjusting, sensitive to the different kinds of force working on the mind, adjusting, accommodating, counteracting, sustaining this quality of balance here in the center. Please feel free to ask any questions. This is a legal moment for doubts. So please feel free to ask anything that was about anything I said that was unclear or didn't make sense or lost you completely. Please, no one chimed in earlier on, but please, if there is anything that people would like to ask about, I'd be happy to try and clarify or explain a little bit. Yes?
This is not from tonight's lecture, but from a couple of lectures ago. When you talked about being critical of others, you said there are several things to consider in that. Would you be good enough to repeat those, please?
Sure. This is the 5 criteria that you should bear in mind when giving negative feedback or criticism. Right. So the first is, well, you can have them in different orders, but say, okay, number 1 is to ask permission of the person to bring something up with them. And the second one is to choose an appropriate time and place, so that you're not kind of putting them on the spot in front of people unnecessarily. The third one is to stick to the facts. Not always easy. So not going on hearsay or supposition or what you're deducing from where someone was coming from. Like you just stick to what you know is true according to events. And then the fourth one is to speak with a heart of loving kindness, to not be coming from a place of self-righteousness or negativity, but genuine wish for the person's welfare and the kind of welfare of all beings, rather than just venting your own spleen. Not like kind of my welfare first, because it'll make me feel good to, avenge myself on this person. And then the last one is to be free of the same fault yourself. That's the kicker.
Thank you very much.
Yeah.
I remember that too, but as a preface, it seems to me that you said something also about 3 things about if it's going to hurt somebody.
Yeah.
And I was trying to remember that.
Well, those were the criteria for when to speak or when not to speak. So that was basically the 3 elements are if something is true or untrue, whether it's pleasant to hear or unpleasant to hear, and whether it's useful or not useful. Right? Those are the 3 dimensions that it works on. And so the Buddha said that he would only say something to somebody if it was true, if it was useful. And whether it was pleasant to hear or unpleasant to hear was not crucial, but he would choose the right time and situation to say something. So if something was true and pleasant to hear, but it wasn't useful, then he wouldn't say it. Or if it was true and pleasant to hear, but if it was true and unpleasant to hear, if it was useful, he would pick the right time to say it. This kind of, you have to sort of pick them up and chew them over, but those are the criteria. And then just that sense of, well, how do you decide when's the right time? You can't really do it by formula. And I think last week and on our earlier sessions we were talking a lot about intuition or intuitive wisdom and this quality of listening. So there's like this evening talking about Brother David's phrase of when you drop the question, the answer appears. So there's a deep listening to the moment. Like say, okay, is this the right time to tell her? Or is this not right? And not trying to figure it out by logic, but really just listening to your own heart, like consulting your own intuition, your feel for the moment. and letting that guide you. So a curiosity arises in my mind, like, there's a question at the back, yeah.
Yes, I liked that whole thing, except for the last one where you have to be free of the. And I'm not being facetious when I say this, because I would appreciate help from people who are not perfect and who are also just stumbling their way through life like the rest of us. If it's coming from a good place.
Yeah.
It's really coming from compassion and honesty. My criteria would not be that they have to be beyond that themselves. They only have to be able to point it out.
Yeah, that's a good point. And I think that if there is something like that you want to bring up with someone, then you can preface that in a very sincere way, like saying, I know I'm not free of anger myself in any way. And they say, well, maybe it's because I'm not free from it that I realize how painful it is. So I wanted to talk with you about those angry states that you find yourself in. And so you can kind of ease into it in that way. So, I mean, these are guidelines, they're not rigid structures, and so that certainly that kind of a way of speaking about it, it's trying to guard against that, what Jesus said about the speck in somebody else's eye when you've got a beam, of a great log in your own. That the tendency is to be finding fault with others and ignoring our own faults. So it's really like owning our own limitations, and then having owned them and really acknowledge that, then speaking from that position. That clarify?
I wasn't really in doubt.
Sorry?
I said I wasn't really in doubt.
Yeah.
A different perspective on it.
Yeah. Yeah.
Could you elaborate on working with sense desire by imagining yourself in that state for 100 years, or any other helpful hints you might have?
Well, it's just like, say you're having a fantasy, and there you are, say a sexual fantasy, and you're locked in some glorious embrace with someone. Now, the delight of that depends on transiency, right? Because if you imagine yourself, there you are in some wonderful embrace, and then it goes on for an hour, I think, well, that's all right. Then a day, without moving, there you are. It's like, well, it kind of loses its glamour after 10 or 12 hours, and then a day it starts to be work, and then a year that's like cruel and inhuman punishment, right? And then 10 years, like, when am I ever going to get out of this bed? I've had enough of this person. We've been breathing each other for 10 years now. We're gonna, and so the kind of attractiveness of that, or like whatever else it might be, like a wonderful piece of music. If you just go on playing, Beethoven's Ninth 150,000 times, it loses its pull. That there's that kind of dependency of something that's sensually appealing or attractive, that we don't realize the dependent nature of it. And so that sometimes when you follow things through, like it's like if you just say yes and then, then what often happens is that if you just pick it up and follow it through, then you get this little voice in the mind that says, shut up! Because you're kind of getting on the case of the desire mind. It's like you've called its bluff. And it's like it only works if you. It's like a card trick. It only works if you can't quite see what the hands are doing. So those kind of it's like using the imagination to see the downside of an imagined or a desired thing. Like if you just calmly and steadily think it through. Because when the mind is pulled by a desire, it's like, oh, if only I had that banana, if only I had those noodles, if only I could get hold of such and such. Then the lie that we're hearing at that time is that the universe has shrunk to such an extent that if there was just this one thing that was there, I would be totally happy. And then in some ways, when you get familiar with this, then if you just, it's like bringing it into the center of the stage and shining the light on it and just saying, oh yes, oh really? You'd never want anything ever again. Shut up! You're ruining the whole thing. It's like, that's why in nightclubs the lights are always very dim. Not that I go to nightclubs, but I remember these things. Kind of dim red light, so that you can't see all the kind of wrinkles and cracks. You can keep the illusion going. They have bright lights in McDonald's because they want to move people through quickly. You don't feel comfortable in the bright light because you can kind of see everything. It all shows. So kind of move them out. Move them along so they don't linger. So the place is never filled up. That's why I was told they always have bright lights in McDonald's. So that the desire mind works a lot on keeping the illusion going. Like, I don't know if I told the story of the little mauve bubble car. Did I tell that here? When I was about 3 or 4, I grew up in we were a very poor family. We were farmers, and so there was very little money around, and so the family system was that the kids only got presents at Christmas or birthdays. That was it. And so our farm was near this little village, and in the village there was a toy shop. And in the window of this toy shop, they had these various little toy cars, what they call matchbox cars, little tiny. Yeah, had them here? Right. So I was born in 1956. So in the late 1950s, there was this kind of car that BMW produced. And I've seen a couple of these sort of micro-type cars around Ukiah. So BMW invented this 3-wheeled car with 2 wheels at the front and 1 at the back, and a door on the front that opened. The front of the car was a door. Some people remember those? Yeah, those of an age. So this was called a bubble car in England. And there was in the toy shop window, there was this little mauve bubble car. And I fell completely in love with it. And every time we went to the village, then I would race to the toy shop window and press my nose against the glass and be transfixed by this little mauve bubble car, and I begged my mother to buy this little mauve bubble car for me. And I begged and I begged and I begged and I begged. But it wasn't my birthday and it wasn't Christmas, and so no bubble car. And so then, during this time, I remember distinctly saying to her, if you just get me the bubble car, I'll never want anything ever again. I'll never ask for anything ever again. And I sincerely believed at that age that I really believed that was true, because I couldn't imagine wanting anything else. If I had that, I would be utterly complete. Mary's already almost in tears with the pathos of this. And then, a couple of weeks before my birthday, I was too young to figure this out, but 2 or 3 weeks before my birthday, the little mauve bubble car vanished from the window of the toy shop. Oh! Heartbreak. It's gone. It was too late. Too late. And so I was really upset, and of course the toy shop owner was in cahoots with my mother, and so I went inside and said, "Is that little mauve bubble car still here?" She said, "Oh no, I don't think so. Oh, don't know where it's gone. No, don't know. Sorry." And so I was, oh dear, broken-hearted. And then suddenly my birthday comes, ta-da! There's this little mauve bubble car. And of course, I'm utterly enraptured and totally happy and intoxicated for at least a day. And then the next day I play with it just a little bit less, and then the third day a little bit less, and by the 4th day it's kind of getting left on the shelf. And then, a couple of weeks later, "Mom, can I have, a cookie, or can I have... She said, you said that you were never going to want anything ever again. You told me, you promised. And she kind of got on my case, kind of playfully. But I said, yeah, but this is different. Now, isn't this a very archetypal situation that we're all familiar with? So that then, and actually, my mother still has the little mauve bubble car. This is now a family heirloom. They've moved house about 4 times since then, but the little mauve bubble car has stayed in the family. So this is the icon, Amaro's icon of desire. The little mauve bubble. Well, how many little mauve bubbles do we have? And it could be, the next woman, the next guy, the next degree, the next house, the next occupation. If I could just get through this course, if I could just get rid of this guy, if I could just get hold of this woman, if I could just get rid of this illness, if I could just get a hold of, if I then the universe shrinks, and then we just buy into that promise, and at that moment we're absolutely sure, like, this is it. And then when we get the moment of gratification, then it's like, there is that, like biting into the berry pie. Yes. And that there is an absolute bliss. But it's not going to last. It can't last. And this is not like the Buddha being a sourpuss. It's like, this is the fact of nature, is it cannot last. We can't stay in bliss because of the bite of pie for eternity. I mean, if you sat there with the mouthful of pie, an hour, gets pretty old pretty fast, right? So that thinking it through in that way, so it's like a kind of sober reflecting. Not because we want to make ourselves miserable, but just like revealing the trick. Like the word glamour is an ancient word, and it comes from when a sorcerer, someone who had magical powers, would disguise themselves, or like when in the Odyssey, when Odysseus came back to Ithaca, Athene, who was his protectress, put a glamour on him, so that he looked like an old man, and that the people of Ithaca wouldn't recognize him. So that's what a glamour is like a disguise that prevents the reality from being seen. So it's like seeing through the glamour is what that's for. And I mean, there's a lot of us, I mean, we spend a lot of billions and hundreds of billions of dollars sustaining the glamour. A year or so ago, we went to Los Angeles to listen to some of the Dalai Lama's teachings, and the kind of local newspaper, there was just like pages and pages and pages and pages of plastic surgery options. Incredible. I mean, things that people were offering to be tweaked, I didn't even know there were things. And tweaking in ways that are just amazingly ingenious to produce effects that you were, it was extraordinary. To keep the glamour going. Like, I didn't see a recent statistic, but in 1999, there was $150 billion was spent in the US on plastic surgery and weight loss products. 150 billion in 1 year in the US on plastic surgery and weight loss products. Things to eat to make you weigh less. That's a heck of a lot of resources to sustain the glamour. So there is a strong tendencies within us that wants to keep the glamour going. So when we're talking about wanting to see through it, that's a sort of, we kind of, in a way, it's like reflecting a spiritual maturity, a sort of a growing up within us that says, well, no matter how well you sustain the glamour, it can only hold for so long, and it only works in certain circles, with the lights at a certain angle, and it's not just the physical appearance. I mean, it's in many, many aspects of our life. You know, the car you drive, the degrees you have, the organizations you belong to, the charities you support, the slogan on your T-shirt. You know, there's so much of it. Yeah.
I think this is sort of related, but when it happens outside the context of meditation, I often have this little dialogue inside about being in a situation that's very satisfying, very happy, very pleasant. And I'm pretty responsive to things, so I can just really go with it. And there's always this little voice going, maybe you shouldn't get that excited about it, because, you know, we know it's passing. And so there's always that debate about how much to let oneself really be engaged by the moment. And then the dialogue moves on to, well, it's okay, we could be really engaged, and then let it go. But we want to be engaged if it weren't this pleasant, so that's probably not, you know, the equation isn't equal. So can you speak to that?
This is a good question. Well, I mean, it's not a fixed thing. You know, in a way, you have to look at the results of it, because the way that often the way we can really learn about what's the right action is looking at the intention and then looking at the results of having followed that action. So you're looking at the intention beforehand, the action, what it feels like when you're performing the action, and then looking at the results of it afterwards. So you're just kind of weighing up the whole thing from before, during, and after. So yesterday, we went to the coast. Mr. Goenkaji was giving a talk in Fort Bragg, so most of the monastery went out to the coast. We had a kind of big day out. One of the senior nuns of our community was visiting from England, so we made a whole day of it, had a picnic and so on and so forth. And we went to the beach at Elk, and somehow or other, the subject of skipping stones. Do you remember how that came up? Or who started that?
Half of us were on one side of the beach, the other half were on completely the other side of the beach, and both halves were skipping stones.
I think what had happened was one of the nuns had been to Elk before with one of the people from the group there, and they'd been skipping stones on the pond. And so it came up, and so then everyone was hunting for flat stones and skipping stones on the sea. And I hadn't skipped stones in like 25 years. And so, you know, there I am on the beach. There was nobody else on the beach except us lot. So it was, there I was, just kind of fully engaged in finding the right stones, just the right weight, and kind of round enough and flat, and waiting for judging the sea when the sea is just flat enough to get a really good skid, and so on and so forth. So there we are, you know, a bunch of Buddhist monks and nuns, shaven-headed renunciates, bopping around on the beach at Elk, skipping stones, you know. And, you know, so that same kind of question might come to mind, like, well, is this really worthwhile doing, or what, you know. But it's like, you weigh up a situation as you're in it. How does it feel? Is this innocent? Is it useful? Is it enjoyable? Is there a purpose to this? How does it, you know, is it delightful? You know, what is this? Not that you're trying to be sort of hyper-analytical about everything, but just getting the feel of it. And just it was a kind of totally innocent, slightly, you know, playful thing for a bunch of us to be doing at the seaside. You know, it's like we were little kids. And why not? Innocent enough. And then, you know, the looking at the result of it, it was a kind of delightful, you know, innocent, joyful thing to be doing together. And the only negative result is a slightly stiff right arm. Got a slight kind of ache in my upper arm. Not having kind of done much of that in the last 25 years. So you weigh it up for yourself. Now, if it had turned out that some kind of high-ranking senior monk from Thailand had just happened to walk on the beach at the same time and saw all of us chucking rocks in the sea and think, that would probably be a much more kind of painful aura to it. Or whatever, or if someone got hit in the head by a rock that went the wrong way, then there would be that was pretty stupid to have got carried away with all of that. But there was none of that.
I think someplace in the wondering about it is that in letting oneself really enjoy something that's happening, given the human propensity to want to do that all the time, and if you like it, well, then you like it for a little bit more. In meditation, you can say, well, I wouldn't like it if it went on for 12 hours, but in regular life, as you're moving around with lots of people, and it's easy to just sort of be drawn into the liking of it. And then I think this is just reinforcing the kind of attachment to wanting things to be happy and pleasurable and nice.
And sometimes it is and sometimes it isn't. That's why, like, looking at the intention, like, well, what's behind this pull into it? What's behind the pull? What's the effect of it? Do I grab every opportunity for this whenever it arises? Is it always this, to seeking another outlet? Or can I choose to follow it or not follow it? And does that feel the same? So that then you weigh it up like that. So, like yesterday on the beach, I could just as easily have not tossed stones or has tossed them. It wasn't something like I was, or I don't imagine that next time I go to a beach that I'll be desperate to find all the flat stones. So that you're seeing the effect in yourself while you're in it, like that kind of yes. And then if you notice that's happening, it's like, oh, this has got a big charge to it. I wonder, how much this just sustains the addiction. Because if you see that the heart is really pulled that way, and it's like, well, this is like a junkie having a good supply of clean drug. As long as the supply keeps up, it's fine. But it's when the supply is cut off, then there's a lot of trouble. It's really very, very painful. So only we can tell for ourselves the dependency that's there. And that the sure sign is if it's the same to be with this or we're not with it, then
That's helpful. Yeah.
then you know.
Thank you.
Okay, so we've passed the 9 o'clock mark. Another evening has gone by.